Welcome back to the ETF Inspector. It is Saturday, October 11th, almost 9 o'clock at night. By the time this airs, it will be Sunday morning, and this is our weekly video where we do a week look ahead and payment guesstimates for our two YieldMax Ultra funds, ULTY, the Ultra Option Income Strategy Fund, and SLTY, the Ultra Short Option Income Strategy Fund. Reminder, I'm on X at ETF Inspector 1. I post all things related to the videos I make with premiere times, and I repost announcements from the different funds that I cover. All right, I've got the Market Chameleon up here because I use them when I'm updating the implied volatilities on the funds. And so let's go ahead and just get right into it. So if you haven't been to a Sunday video before, they are a little bit longer, a little bit more detail, because we're going to look at changes in implied volatility, which helps us make our payment guesstimates, and look at our options, how they sit for the week ahead. And we also look behind at how we performed over the past week. So first off, we've got our trades. So from 10-6 through 10-10, not the most trades we've ever had, but it still ended up being about 250 trades for the week for ULTY. They lost 24 million on Monday, lost another 9.5 million on Tuesday, had a profit of 3.2 million on Wednesday, lost 16.8 million on Thursday, and lost 19 million on Friday, for an overall loss of $66 million for the week. I did forget to mention, if you can hear like a constant noise in the background, it's the washing machine. We are out of town for a soccer tournament for my youngest daughter, so we're not in our normal spot, and I'm kind of close to the washing machine. Hopefully it's not too much of a distraction. All right, so as far as the trading days were concerned, that was how the realized gains and losses went. We also have unrealized changes in market value, just as underlyings increased or decreased. So on Monday, things went up $66 million, the underlyings as a whole. On Tuesday, they went down $25.5 million. Wednesday, they were up $48.5 million. Thursday, up $16.4 million. And then we all know Friday was absolutely horrendous. It was a $158 million decrease in value. So overall, for the week, it was $53 million. So if it wasn't for the ugly Friday, we would actually we were having a very good week once again. We were still sitting at 550 or 551 before the market tanked somewhere around, I guess, 11 o'clock. All right, so as far as the income, that helps us make our first part of the estimate, but when it's negative, it really doesn't help us because that would be negative 10 cents per share. So they tell us to look to the IV after that, and to get that number, we've got to back up some and get our updated IV. So this isn't perfect because they're using the weekly IVs, whereas I'm pulling the 30-day. There's not normally a huge change, but there was big changes this week because of how ugly Friday got. So again, that's where I pull up Market Chameleon and I look up the 30-day IV. This is just for helping us with a guesstimate. It's not an exact science, not to mention every option has its own implied volatility, and all of them actually are taken into account when YieldMax is making their decision. But in order to get all of those, I would have to look up everything like one at a time through my broker, and it's just not worth the time and effort. So this is our get us close. All right, big picture when we scroll down, 19 of the underlyings had an increase in implied volatility, where 3 had a decrease, and all 3 of our put spreads also increased in implied volatility. Next to the IV, we also have the weighting. So this is not the overall weighting in the fund. This is just if we totaled up each of the underlyings, we leave out the cash, we leave out the options, and we leave out the government funds. We just total up the underlyings, because they're the only things we're really trading that are going to have IV. We're not trading on cash or government funds, so we're not taking them into account, and we don't really have a good way to weight the options. So that's just how we're doing it. And we've got just under 2% in Affirm, had an increase to 85% IV. Bullish has 3.4%, and they decreased actually to 80% on the implied volatility. Excuse me. Bitmine Immersion, 3.75% was a decrease, but it's still high, 111+%. Centene Corp, although it's not factoring into our calculation, we do just let you know it is at 65.5%, and that's an increase from last week. 5.9% of the money's in Coinbase, and it increased last week to 73.3%. CoreWeave increased to 91.4%, and it's a large portion, 6.5% of the money. Figma, 4.2%, increased to 103.2% IV. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. I keep having a cough. Galaxy's up 97.6. That's another put spread. Hims and Hers, 5.4% of the money. It's an increase over 110%. Robinhood, over 6% of the money, increased to over 76% IV. Lucid Group's got 3.4% weight and 92.5% on the IV. Lululemon's still a low one. Kind of surprising, but 43.4. It's just the put spread. MP Material Corp, a little over 4.5% of the money, increased to over 99% IV. Strategy, they were struggling to stay above 50 for a while. Now they're getting close to 70. That's an increase with 3.2% of the money. Open Doors got 2.3% of the money and increased to 143%. And they're not the highest. Palantir, 6.4. That's a large percentage of the money, increased to 71.8. Pony AI's got 3.7%, and they increased over 104%. Quantum Computing dropped, but it's still close to 121%. It's 4% of the money. Man. Rigetti, 5.8%. They're the high one, 144% IV. That's going to help the calculation. Rocket Lab up over 7%, and it's 110+% on the IV. Rocket Companies, almost 4.8% of the money, increased to 85.7. New Scale Power, almost 5.8%, increased to almost 120% on the IV. Soundhound AI is up over 109% with more than 4% of the money. Symbotic, 4.3% of the money, 83.5% on the IV is an increase, and Upstart's the last increase, 109.5 on the IV, 3.1%. So the average underlying is 4.5%. So as we went through, you get to see what was higher, what was lower. Again, I've talked about this before. So here's probably the closest to average. So average would be $125 million if everything was evenly allocated, which it is not. There was a time when it sat a lot closer. All right, so all of those changes brought our weighted average of our underlyings 30-day IV up to 99.18%. That's absolutely insane. That's up from 84.32% last week. So just crazy on that. But unfortunately, our share price did drop, and those two things factor into making the IV estimate. So when we use those numbers, we come up with 10.13 cents. So it's been a little while, been maybe 2 months since we've had a 10-cent distribution. Do I think we're actually going to get one? I'm going to say no. I don't. Obviously, our share price took a huge hit, and so then here's the other part of that. The IV was not 99% all week where they were trading it. It basically skyrocketed to 99% on Friday, and it happened after we made all our trades. So we were not trading at an IV of 99%, so I don't think we're going to be paying out that. Now, if it stays that next week, that's a different story. It's possible. But so what I came up with is actually thinking that we're going to go under 9 cents. I think this is going to be the time we go under 9 cents. Obviously, we took a huge hit to our share price. And I think we were trading lower, so I think we are going to pay 8.68 cents per share. That would be an 85% annual yield on the payment. Now, is it possible? I really don't like the chances of it. I think we took too much of a hit to knock another 10 cents off this week, especially thinking that we could possibly have more trouble ahead when the markets open back up next week. So I think this is the one where we go under 9 cents, but that's all my gut, right? The numbers say it's going to be 10 cents. I just don't think they're going to do it. All right, next we're going to take a look at how each of our underlyings is set up with their options, what kind of trading ranges. So here's the silver lining. We rolled a lot of our positions before the market took its dip on Friday. So if we take a look, I don't know if you can see this dotted line, but here was the here was the open. So we were up. We've rolled all our positions pretty early in the day. We can tell that because we paid to close out. We paid a lot of money to close out some things that ended way out of the money and would have been a penny to close. So we know we rolled them high, and the other way we know is because now our positions are sold at a much higher strike price than we normally would. Our calls sold for a firm are at 78. They're 9.6% out of the money, with it closing at 71. We've also sold puts to help pay for our puts, and those at 65 are 8.6% out. Bullish closed at $60.41. They've got $64 calls sold. They're almost 6% out. Bitmine Immersion closing at $52.47. They have calls sold at 57.5 and 61. They're just about 9.6 and 16+% out of the money. Centene Corp, this is one of our 3 put spreads. Our puts are sold at 37. The stock closed at 35.76, so they're starting in the money by 3.5%. Coinbase Global, just over 357 was the close. They've got calls sold at 370 and 400. Right in this column here is the quantity of contracts, so 2,000 and 2,525. They're 3.6 and 12% out of the money. CoreWeave closed at 138.43. They have 144s and 157.50 sold, 4% and 13.7% out of the money. We look at cash on hand. We'll include the government obligation funds, $596 million there, and it's actually negative down on the cash, $23 million. So it's about 573, 574, something in that range. Figma closing just over 61. Calls are sold at 70 and 75. They are 14.6 and 22.8% out of the money. So what this means is we're either going to see closing for a win and rolling down closer to the money strikes, or we're going to see we have the ability for our stocks to have a very nice rebound that we can capture and not be capped on. Galaxy Digital, here's a second one of our put spreads. Selling the put side of it at 39.5. Stock closed at 39.38, so they are actually already in the money as well, 0.3%. Hims and Hers, just under 54. They have calls sold at 56 and 60, 3.8 and 11.2% out. They also sold puts to help pay for their protective puts at 38 and 42. They're 29.5 and 22% out of the money. Let's take a step back real quick. So I have been forgetting. We usually don't talk about the purchased puts because they're just insurance, but they're going to come into play this week. We're going to make a lot of money off of them. As you can see, our purchased puts for a firm are closer to the money now than even our sold calls, so you can see they actually have more value than everything that we've sold combined. Similar here, Bitmine immersion, our puts purchased at 53 are already in the money by 1%. 50s are 4% out, so they're closer too. So again, they're worth more than what it would cost to close out our other options. So you get the idea. Coinbase puts already 2.2% in the money. They're already worth $17.90. So very working well. That's the whole point of those protective puts. The stock price drops, it hurts, but then you get some money back on those protective puts. All right, Robinhood closing just under 139. We have calls sold at 146 and 157.5. 5 and 13% out of the money. Our protective puts at 140 are already in the money. Lucid Group just under 21. They have 2350 sold that are 12% out of the money. Lululemon, here's another one of our put spreads. We don't own any shares. The short puts, or the sold ones, at 172.50 are in the money by almost 3% already. MP Material Corp closed at 78.34. They've got 86s sold on their calls, 9.7% out. They have $80 puts purchased, so we're already in the money on them by 2%. They're worth almost $9 million. Strategy closed at 304.79. They have calls sold at 332.50 and 342.50, 9 and 12% out of the money. Open Door, 757 close price. We've sold calls at 8 and 8.50, 5.6 and 12.2% out. Palantir closed at 175.44. Calls are sold at 185. They're 5.5% out of the money. Pony AI closing at 20.29. Calls are sold at 21.50 and 23.50, 5.9 and 15.8% out of the money. Quantum Computing closing just over 19 on Friday. They have calls sold at 21, 22.50 and 23. As you can see, the 21 and 22.50 makes up 55,000 contracts, and then 23 is just another 2,500. But they're 10, 18, and almost 21% out of the money. And you can also see their puts purchased at 19.50 are already 2.5% in the money and worth more than what it would cost to close out all the sold calls. Rigetti Computing closing just a little under 44. Calls are sold at 48 and 49 and 50, 9.2, 11.5, and 13.8% out of the money. And then take a look at these puts that are already worth $12+ million. Rocket Lab closed at 64.26. They sold calls at 70. They're 8.9% out of the money. Rocket Companies closing at 16.39. Calls sold at 17.50 or 6.7% out. Puts sold at 14 to help pay for the 15s are 14.5% out. NewScale Power, 39.24 closing price on Friday. They've got calls sold at 40.50 and 42, 3.2 and 7% out of the money. They also sold puts at 30 and 32 to help pay for the puts at 35 and 37. Those sold puts are 18.5 and 23.5% out of the money. SoundHound, 17.36 closing. They sold $19 calls. They're 9.5% out. Symbotic, 63.76 was the close on Friday. They sold 68s and 71s. They're 6.6 and 11.3% out of the money. And finally, Upstart, 48.58 was the closing price. 55 is the sold strike on the calls, 13.2% out. $42 puts were sold to help pay for the $47 protective puts. They're 13.5% out of the money. All right, our assets under management, $3.3 billion, or $3,344 million. There was no, this was surprising with that huge market change on Friday. There was no change in outstanding shares. So the inflows and outflows kind of equaled each other. So they did not create or take away any shares, ending at 627,850,000. NAV is at 533. So if you bought below that, you actually got a little discount. And most recently on Friday, we got 9.04 cents per share. I started a new thing a handful of weeks ago where I average out just the first call or the closest to the money call for each underlying, and they are 7.8% out of the money on average. So on average, everything in the fund could increase by 7.8% before we would hit like a cap. That would actually be beautiful, obviously. And then the second call obviously is going to be further out, 13.7. So we are looking at a week where we are probably going to generate a good amount of income, or if the stock recovers, we are set to be able to capture a lot of that recovery. So once again, before I move on, my guess is 8.68 cents per share coming from ULTY this week. Next, we have SLTY. Definitely don't want to give it anywhere near as much time. We're 21 minutes into this, so we're going to try and speed through a little faster, because where ULTY has 627 million shares, $3.3 billion in it, this one's got 16 or 17 million dollars in it and 450,000 shares. So obviously not as much of an interest, so we don't want to spend as much time on it. Trading wise, they made about 90 trades over the course of the week. They were profitable or break even every day this week, collecting 22,000 on Monday, nothing Tuesday or Wednesday, 214,000 on Thursday, and 168,000 on Friday, for a total of $405,000. Now we do know that they closed out some shares on Duolingo and Lemonade, which most likely, which I'm not going through 1,000 lines to total everything up, but they took some loss because those moved up some. So that's going to take away from that $400,000 profitable week, and that's going to play into the calculation. If it didn't, that'd be 90 cents a share. So I don't think they're paying out 90 cents a share. But next up, we go to the estimate based on the IV. And again, right, we update the IVs after the, I usually do it on Saturday mornings, so the markets have closed for the week and everything can get updated for the entire week. So we'll scroll through. 6+% weight in Astera Labs increased to 107% on the IV. AMD is a new one, 5.82%, but it did increase from the time it got added until Friday. Obviously, everything had a crazy Friday. 66.8. AST Space Mobile, just under 5.9%, was a decrease to 101.3% IV. Bloom Energy, 8.75, so that's a larger holding, 130+% IV. That's huge. BitDeer over 9%, another big one. Decreased, but it's still over 105%, so that's another big one for the calculation. Circle Internet Group, 6.7%, increased to 102+. Duolingo, 6.14%, increased to almost 95%. Enphase Energy, almost 5.5% of the money, increased to almost 92% IV. GitLab's over 7% with a 56.6% IV decrease. Iron, 7.7%, another big one, increased to almost 128%, huge. Kratos, 6.26%, weight, 84.9% IV is an increase. Lemonade increased also, getting over 97% with just under 4% weight. Nebius Group, that's enormous, 12+% of the money. It's the largest holding in here, and it increased to 106.7%. RH, 5.35% holding, 68.1% implied volatility. So that's kind of just like how much it can move, right? Or what you could expect. Tesla, Smaller holding 2.86% increase to 61.2. So on average, the average underlying is 6.6% weight. So Nebius Group coming in at almost double the average is crazy. We could see a trimming of that soon. So 12 increased in implied volatility this week with 3 decreases. That overall increased the underlying 30-day IV weighted average from 86 to 97%. Salty did make a recovery on Friday since the market crashed, so I wouldn't, maybe not crashed, but it dropped. It was ugly. So the second portion of this will come out to 75.24 cents per share. Again, I don't know that I want to give them that calculation because that enormous increase in implied volatility all happened in the, call it, second half of Friday when they were already kind of done making their trades. So I don't want to give them that much. Let me see. Let me see what I gave them. I might change this a little bit. So my guesstimate was 66.5, and yeah, so I basically gave them 86% based on what they were trading on all week. But just understand that there is I'm actually thinking my guesstimate might be the bottom. I think 66.5 may be low, and we could see a decent amount more. I could be off by a good percentage on this one, and that's fine. We like upside surprises, but let's see what kind of payouts. Oh, you know what? They haven't even updated this page at all. They don't even show any of their payouts. We might be able to get it on. Yeah, I don't know. I could go through, but I don't want to unlock a ton of things. Let's see if we can do it real quick. Okay, so far they've paid 70.62, 55.2, 55.12, 62.56, 63.46, and 60.87. Do we think that they're going to make the highest payment yet? 70.6. I think it would just be too high of a payment. Let's see what 71 would do. Are they going to pay out 92% and dethrone ULTY? It's possible, but I'm not giving it to them. So we will see. They might make their biggest payment yet. All right, next up, we're going to take a look at how they are sitting for the week. Try to get through this quickly. So they do reverse collar strategy, so it's kind of the opposite of ULTY. They're selling puts because they short sold the shares. And then sometimes they will buy calls to help pay for their protective calls. So Astera Labs, puts are sold at 215. They're already in the money by 4%. Calls are sold at 275. They're way out of the money, 33%. Advanced Micro Devices, puts are sold at 225. Again, already 4.7% in the money. That's crazy that these are exactly the same, 255 and 275, 250 and 275. Calls sold at 275 are almost 28% out. AST Space Mobile, $84 puts sold are already in the money, 2%. $110 calls sold are 34% out of the money. Bloom Energy, puts are sold at $84. They're 3.3% out. BitDeer, puts are sold at $20.50. They're 15% in the money. That's real ugly. Calls are sold at $26. They're 46% out. Circle Internet Group puts are sold at $141. They're 6% in the money. Calls are sold at $210. They're almost 58% out of the money. Duolingo, puts are sold at $325. They are dead on at the money. Calls are sold at $410, 26% out. Enphase Energy, puts are sold at $33.50. They're 2.2% out of the money. GitLab sold their puts at 43.50. They're about 2.5% out. They sold their calls at $53. They're 18.8% out of the money. Iron sold their puts at 58. They're just about 3% out. Their calls are sold at 80. They're 33% out. Kratos Defense sold puts at $98. They're 3.5% in the money already. And their calls are sold at 120, 26.8% out. Lemonade sold puts at 48. They're practically at the money. They're 4 cents out of the money. Nebius Group sold puts at 126. They're 2.7% out of the money. RH sold their puts at 177.50. They're 2.3% out. And Tesla sold their puts at 402.50. They're 2.6% out of the money. So they've got $18 million in assets under management. No change in shares on Friday, 450,000. The NAV, the value of all of this combines, comes to $40.14 a share. And the ETF was actually trading at a premium up at $40.25 a share. When we take a look at the average first put, so you want this out of the money because you want the stock to drop. So the stocks can't really drop because the puts are basically already in the money by 1.5%. So this is shaping up to be an ugly week for Salty. Point being, if the stock market continues its decline, if the puts are already in the money, you will not be able to capture any of that decline because as your value is moving up, the cost to close out your puts is going to increase equally, so you will not be able to capture any of that movement. The only way that you can end up winning your trades is if the stocks go up, but you shorted them. So if the stocks go up, you might win your trades, but then you're going to drop in your value. So this is looking like a rough week for Salty. Now they will most likely open up and go ahead and roll a lot of these positions. So they're just gonna have to spend a bunch of money to roll these positions, opening the potential back up. All right, so that's all I have for you on ULTY and Salty. So we're 32 minutes in. You're due for a dad joke, and so we can get this thing over with. So just a recap for that, my guess, 66.5 cents per share for Salty. All right, so let me find my dad joke. Dad joke of the day. Before I do, thank you again. Thank you for all the support, likes, shares, and comments, watching the videos, chatting in the live chat. Sorry I haven't been paying as much attention since we are away. I kind of just get the video made and then run to a soccer game or run to a dinner or whatever. So, okay, dad joke of the day. What does a zombie vegetarian eat? I feel like you would say a vegetarian zombie. What does a zombie vegetarian eat? Grains instead of brains. That one's kind of cheesy. All right, hope you have a great day. Got my personal video, my personal trades and holdings video came out Saturday morning. You got the Friday recap if you missed that, and then there will also be the LFGY, and I'm going to combine blocks into that week look ahead. So thank you and have a good day.